Hey there, I'm Sammy and welcome back to my channel. Have you ever stumbled upon an old, ugly piece of furniture and thought, there is no way I can salvage that? Well, today, I'm here to prove you wrong. Take a look at this piece from 1988 that we're working on today. I'm sure it has seen better days and I could not wait to see what was hiding underneath this old paint. Trust me, this transformation is going to blow your mind. From stripping off the old paint to building a new base, I'm going to show you this magical journey of refurbishment. So grab your toolkit, buckle up, and join me for this DIY adventure. I got started with stripping this old paint and I could not wait to see what the wood looked like underneath it. Until I discovered something totally unexpected. So I had to come up with a totally different plan, and I made a run to Home Depot. I always check the whoopsie section because sometimes I find a really cool paint for really cheap. This time I didn't, so I picked out a paint color I wanted for this piece and I got it mixed. Then I had to get a special primer for this piece, and I'll explain why I opted for this one later in the video. Then I was on the hunt for some good wood for the legs and base I was building for this dresser. For the legs, I'm using 2x2 pine board. Quick pro tip, always check and make sure your wood is straight and free from bows and damage. I find that quality of lumber at the big box stores can vary, and I want to make sure I'm always selecting the best that they have. I probably went through this whole entire rack before I found the one that I was happy with. For the base, I opted for a 1x3 of pine board and then I loaded it all up. I grabbed some plastic drawer glides since I noticed earlier that the original ones were broken, and I'll show you how I installed those later as well. I'm keeping track of all my expenses throughout this whole process, and at the end of the video, I'll cover my total cost and labor breakdown. Alright, back to stripping the paint. You're probably wondering what I discovered that was so unexpected. If you look closely, the top of this piece is not wood. It's actually some type of plastic, but after more scraping, I discovered there was also some really cool wood throughout this piece. I would normally use a heavy-duty paint stripper like Citrus Strip, but since this paint was so thick, I opted to use my heat gun and paint scraper, which ended up working so well. This part of the process was honestly so satisfying to work on that I just had to get some footage and share it with you. So I hope you're ready to see some mesmerizing footage of me removing this old paint. You can see just how effective this heat gun is at lifting the paint up from the wood and how effortless it is removing it with the paint scraper. As I was removing it, I noticed there were 3 different layers of paint on this piece, and the heat gun scraper combo made quick work of it. However, it was a little more challenging around the detailed areas like the handles, but I'll show you how I tackled that later. But for now, sit back and relax and enjoy this satisfying footage. This was my first time using a heat gun to strip old paint, and as I progressed throughout this piece, I was honestly shocked by how great this method is. Unlike the normal stripper I use, there is no gooey mess left behind that needs cleaned. I can go right from stripping the paint to sanding immediately after. I will definitely be using this heat gun for my future projects. Even though it's already October here in Georgia, it was still so hot outside, and my coworker Melino opted to take a nap in the shade. I finally got most of the paint off and I decided to touch up a few spots on this dresser. I'm using all-purpose Bondo and just applying it with a paint stick to some damaged areas, really working it in there. I always try to apply a little more than I need since I will sand it off smooth and level after it dries anyway. I also like to apply painter's tape on the edges and corners to give the Bondo a little more structure while it cures. This retractable extension cord has been my new obsession lately, and I wanted to share it with you all since it's been so useful for me.
I found that I'm no longer looking for outlets or putting away extension cords. This just helps me keep my space more tidy while also being more efficient with my time. The next step is my least favorite part of redoing furniture, but is probably the most important part: sanding. I started off using 100 grit sandpaper to really try and knock off that old finish. After a little sanding, I saw the beautiful rich tones of the natural wood and I could barely contain my excitement. I think it was white oak and I was just so happy with how this piece was progressing. One of the reasons I love restoring furniture is because how it allows me to express my creativity. Sometimes I get hung up trying to figure out what my plan is for a piece, but I found that once I get started on it, it really kickstarts my vision of where I want to take it. So if you're still trying to decide what to do with an old piece of yours, I say just go for it. Your inspiration will come. I've been refurbishing furniture for over a year now, and I find it to be the perfect side job for me. I'm a full-time college student, and having the ability to be in charge of my work and my free time is so liberating, and I love being in charge of my schedule. Not only that, but for me, it's such a calming and therapeutic process that I enjoy making time for. I also appreciate how I can fill my home with furniture that I've had a part in creating, and it's nice that I can usually do this for much cheaper than buying new furniture. I think I have close to 12 pieces in my home that I've created, and I hope to show you all those in a later video. Here's Molino again, finding some more shade to take a nap in. I always get asked how much I make redoing furniture, and it honestly depends on so many things and how much time you put into it. I've made anywhere from $150 to $1,200 profit on pieces I've restored. Once you've done this a few times, you can really determine what pieces are worth your time and how to become more efficient with your time as well. I think last month I made around $2,500, and sometimes it's more and other times it's less. I have a spreadsheet tracking all of my work and profit margins, and if you guys want to see a video of that, let me know in the comments below. The drawers were almost all done and starting to look really good. I still had to detail sand the handles, but for now I was off to scuff sand the rest of the dresser. I'm using that same 100 grit sandpaper to go over every inch of the surface.
Alright, I've got most everything sanded, and now I'm going to go in and give this a proper cleaning before I go ahead and give it a coat of primer.
I started off by vacuuming any big chunks of dirt and debris, then I went in with my air compressor to blow any dust off, and I finished it off with wiping it down with an all-purpose degreaser. Next step was priming, so I laid out my painting blanket before I got started. Since I found the plastic veneer on this dresser, I didn't want to use my normal Kills all-purpose primer. I had to change what primer I was going to be using, which is why I picked up this Zinsser Bullseye primer you saw me get at Home Depot. This will definitely be a better suited primer for this piece, as it's designed to adhere to any type of surface, including plastic, and will block any residual odor or stain from seeping through. I ended up using about 1.5 cans of primer to completely coat this piece. And what do you know, look who I caught taking, once again, another nap.
So I just noticed that one of the drawers is coming apart. I've got it standing up on its side here. This is the back of it, and the seam is just separating. So all I need to do is toss some glue in the seam, clamp it, and it should be good to go.
Before I get the paint on, I'm going in with a 220 grit sandpaper to smooth over any rough spots that may have formed while I was priming. This part doesn't need to be super in-depth, just a light sand will do. Next step was painting, and I opted for this color you're seeing me spray here. I have just found my new favorite shade of black paint for furniture. I know it can be overwhelming to pick between all the different choices they have for paint, so if you're wondering what color I'm using, it's called Coal by Behr. This dark paint will really accentuate the natural wood in the drawers as well as the new base I'll be building later in this video. I normally try to keep as much of the original wood as I can when working on natural pieces. For me, it's just a way to pay homage to the original creation and keep its history alive. I did 2 coats of this paint with my spray gun, sanding with the same 220 grit sandpaper in between coats. I let that dry overnight and I got started on the drawers the next morning. I was not looking forward to sanding the drawer handles after all the sanding I did yesterday, but it needed to be done. So I got to it and grabbed my Detail Ryobi sander, which got rid of all the old yellow paint I couldn't get with my orbital sander. When it comes to stains, I have a hard time choosing just one. Here I have my pre-stain on the left and the 2 colors on the right. I wanted the depth the darker one will give, but also the warmth of the lighter one too. Applying both of the stains gave me the perfect shade I was looking for. I started off with applying the pre-stain to the drawers, followed by the 2 different stains. I let all of that dry while I got started on building the base. I popped inside to get exact measurements of the bottom of the dresser so I could build the base to match. I made each leg 5.5 inches to give it a little height, and later we'll angle the 2 front legs to give it that MCM look. I measured the first cut with my measuring tape, but on the other legs, I'm just using the built-in ruler on the miter saw. It not only saves time, but gives you an accurate measurement every time. I cut the 2 back legs first, and then outlined the angle of the front legs. Here, I'm making sure the blade and my outline are aligned perfectly. I clamped the wood down so I wouldn't have to keep my fingers anywhere near the blade since this was such an awkward angle to cut. This cut was exactly what I was going for. I then repeated the same process for the other front leg. This is what my 4 legs looked like when I had them cut, and then we were off to cutting the base. In order to cut the pieces I needed for the front and sides of the base, I had to account for the dimensions of the legs I just made. Each leg was 1.5 inches, so I'm subtracting 3 inches from each cut I'm making for the base, since there will be a leg on either end. If you're confused, just keep watching, and I think once the base is all put together, it will be easier to visualize. Here, I'm using my Kreg jig to drill holes in the boards I just cut for the base. I'm drilling holes for the legs to screw in and holes to screw the base into the dresser itself. I then gave the boards a quick sand with my orbital sander to smooth over any rough edges, and then gave the legs a quick sand by hand with my sanding block. Once everything was sanded, I began to assemble the base. This part was so fun. It kind of felt like I was putting together Legos with how everything was coming together. I'm just an amateur woodworker, but every time I build things out of wood, I find so much satisfaction in the whole process. After just a few minutes of drilling all the screws, the base was ready to go. Next, the base was ready for the same pre-stains and stains I used for the drawers. The drawers and the base were finally dry, and I began sealing them with a polyurethane satin finish sealer. I had some left over in these spray cans, so I figured I would use them up. I typically don't use these because how they spray, and I probably won't be getting them again. But since I did use them here, you can see me using a paintbrush to smooth over any areas where the finish wasn't applied evenly. With all of my work done outside, I moved the base and drawers inside to wrap up this project. Here was the moment of truth to see if this base fit, and thankfully it did. With the dresser on its back, it was very easy to screw in using the pre-drilled holes I made earlier with the Kreg jig. The second moment of truth was to see if the base I just made could hold the weight of the dresser. I tested it and it was very durable and I'm not worried about it at all. Next, it was time to get the drawers in, but first I had to repair the broken drawer glides like I promised you all at Home Depot. I started by removing the old glides on the drawers themselves as well as the ones in the dresser. All it took was a few minutes to replace them with the new ones I had purchased. It was finally time to put the drawers in and see this piece come together and get it staged for some photos. This was definitely a fun project for me, and if you remember the old yellow dresser we started with, I think we can definitely say mission accomplished for this trash to treasure transformation. I did promise you all a breakdown of price and labor at the end, so let's get into it. I bought this piece for $30 and put $42 into it for materials, bringing my total amount in at $72. I have it listed for $450, which would leave me a total profit of $378. This project took me 8 hours to complete, which would come to about $47 an hour. I hope you found value in this video, and if you did, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Remember, with a bit of determination and a sprinkle of imagination, anything is possible. So don't give up on those old trash pieces just yet. They might surprise you, and you just might surprise yourself. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next week.